Hey guys, so this is actually going to be the last build guide video of this league because I decided to take a break from Path of Exile until the next league, and this build is just full meme build. This build has some kind of nostalgic feel. Not sure how many people still remember old school vacuuming all the enemies and then using the ghost to tag the enemies for more loot. So this is kind of has that part. But it's also a reflect build because Molten Shell is a reflect, and it's a bit complicated to explain everything. It does have some interesting numbers for single target, and for clear speed it can do like vacuum enemies. It can I wouldn't say the clear speed is actually the worst part. I didn't really level this very high. I should have done a normal build and then refund it into this, but I decided to just play as a reflect build almost right from the start. Every time I do a reflect build, I forget how reflect scales. I actually had quite a few reflect builds in the past, mostly with the reflect totems, and every time I have to go back to one of my previous videos, I believe it's this one, to see how exactly it reflect scales. Good thing I wrote down how everything scales, so I don't need to rewatch the whole video to figure out how everything scales. But turns out that nothing that increases the damage affects reflect, and path of building is actually wrong. Path of building is not up to date, I guess, because elemental damage, fire damage, even elemental overload, that would still affect PUB in numbers, but that is not the case. I did some testings and it definitely does not scale the damage. So the only way to get the damage for a reflect is to debuff enemies. So like skitterbots, because we apply shocks, lowering enemy resistances, penetration also does not work except on alt quality Molten Shell, which does, one of the alt quality does have 20% penetration at 20 quality. Actually, I can even show you an older build. This is a bit going down the memory lane. This is very old build. This was like, wow, I posted this like 7 years ago. And this is how the game looked like, and I was playing on a very crappy PC. And this was not a true reflect, because in PoE you can't really do a true reflect. But this was using Tempest Shield. Tempest Shield was also a bit different. It could proc as many times per second as you block. This was basically every time I would block, I would proc the Tempest Shield. It would chain a couple times. So that was one of the older builds. Actually, if you're talking about old school builds, we also used to have Vaal Righteous Fire, which would also explode. I just wanted to show quickly how things have changed in over, what, 7 years. And this was with the Vaal Righteous Fire. It would explode almost like discharge. And look at that. Boom. The PC obviously lags. Then everything explodes and everything ignites. Back then we didn't even have loot filter. Oh my god. That is so weird. Yeah, and my PC was still crappy. Okay, I'm getting distracted a bit too much. I'm gonna explain how everything here works. Maybe not how everything works, because I don't think that people actually want to play this build, but I'm gonna explain a couple of things that matter. I'm not sure how to structure this video, because there's a lot to explain. Because this is a reflect damage, you cannot scale it through passive points or through just getting elemental damage, or elemental overload would not scale that. So, well, one of the ways is to increase the gem level, then you could reflect more damage. By the way, this is Divergent Vaal Molten Shell. Divergent gives reflected damage penetrates up to 20% of enemy fire resistance on a normal Molten Shell. The Vaal version still uses the default one. The way I'm getting more damage is I'm using a corrupted Invictus Solaris. Ideally you would want with the +1 corruption, because that would also affect empower and enhance. Inside the shield I'm getting +8 to the Molten Shell. I'm also getting another +1 on the amulet and another +1 on the weapon. So currently this is like level, I don't even know what level. It doesn't, the text is way too large, I cannot even see what level it is. But the reason why you want the shield, because when you put empower and enhance, it is getting +2 levels. If you get +1 corrupted instead of +2 EUE gems, +1 to Sacred Gems corruption, then it would be another +3 to empower and +3 to enhance, which would buff the quality even more. That's why ideally you would want +1 Sacred Gems corruption. because the quality does give a lot of penetration, and that's the only way to get penetration for reflect damage, because reflect damage cannot apply elements as well. I forgot to mention that at the start. So you cannot do ignite. You used to be able to do ignite with the Molten Shell, but then it got reworked into reflect damage. So there's very limited options how to scale the damage now. And then you just debuff the enemies, like I'm using Elemental Equilibrium. When I do the Cyclone and Vacuuming enemies, I'm also hitting a bit with cold damage, so it lowers enemy fire resistance. And then the Molten Shell explodes, doing more damage. The way you power up Molten Shell, you need enough armor. I have 70 something K armor, and normal Molten Shell will get up to 10,000 shield. If you deplete all 10,000 from the shield, you will do full damage. And that full damage, that 10,000 is gonna be amplified by, in this case, 5,430% is gonna be dealt to enemies as an explosion. And then all the other modifiers like penetration, in this case is 52% fire pen, then lowering enemy resistances, then exposure, then combustion on our skill. So when all that happens, you can actually see that from POB numbers, the average hit in this case with not fully built, this is level 76, would do 1.3 million average hit. But that's if you fully power it up. With Vaal Molten Shell, you can actually see that the damage goes even higher with Vaal Molten Shell, and that's on the final explosion. Vaal Molten Shell works a bit differently. It absorbs less, so you actually need to do way more damage to yourself. It's not even possible to survive that much. But because this is a Jugger, each time I mitigate physical damage, I also get massive regen. When I'm using Vaal Molten Shell and fighting a single target, and I stack to the self damage, I start to get over 3,000 life regen per second, because I'm mitigating a lot of physical damage from trauma stacks and obviously from enemy hits, and at the same time I'm removing the shield from Vaal Molten Shell, so it starts to do more and more damage, and the final explosion can do like some serious damage, like 9 million, but I haven't figured out how you could survive that much, because you don't want to mitigate the damage that you do, because you have a short window during which you have to do enough damage to yourself. But also during that window, the trauma stacks ramp up so high to like 7,000, which you mitigate by like 80-90%. But as soon as you drop Molten Shell, you don't have the protection, and you can very quickly like one shot or two shot yourself. That happens so many times to me. So this build is very tricky, and it used to be better before, because. So here we go. I have a very old video with the old school Vaal Molten Shell, which worked differently. Sorry for the quality. Back then I had very crappy PC, and I couldn't even produce higher quality videos. But Vaal Molten Shell used to work differently. It used to explode on every single hit. So you activate Vaal Molten Shell, every time you get hit, it explodes. And yes, that's how it actually looked. All the frame freezes and stuff like that. These days it would be kind of OP, because you could, and as you can see, this was an ignite as well. So many things have changed over what, 7 years now, and actually damage used to be like really good with the Vaal Molten Shell, and these days you could proc it way faster, and it would just absolutely instantly melt bosses. If this existed today, in today's PoE. So many things have changed, and many things change for a good reason. Oh, by the way, old school Incinerate. Kind of missed that thing as well. I believe I was using. No, I was just waiting for the boss to. Yeah, I don't quite remember. I just wanted to quickly show how old school Vaal Molten Shell used to look like. And nowadays it's much harder to do a proper meme build like that, but then again, if it was viable enough, then it wouldn't be a meme and everyone would be using it. To be honest, I'm not even sure what I already explained. I'm gonna try to very quickly condense all the information into one, how everything works. I Cyclone with reverse knockback to pull enemies in. Then I quickly use Molten Shell. Enemy starts hitting me, starts removing the shield from it. Or I can stop and use trauma stacks from Bone Shatter to do damage to myself. And then you don't want it Molten Shell to explode too fast because you want to do enough damage to yourself. You don't want less duration, stuff like that. You want even increased duration. It has a like 3-second cooldown, so it's not a big deal. During that time you can pull more enemies in and then activate Molten Shell, blow all the enemies at once. It does seem like it has some kind of hit limit. Very often it explodes, but half of the enemy remain. So I'm not sure if it has a hit limit of like 50 enemies or something like that. Also, I do have 100% chance to knock enemies back. You even pick the knockback distance on the passive skill tree. That's another thing. If you get too much AoE, there are so many things to explain about this. I'm not even sure what to explain. If you have too much AoE, the enemies are gonna be dragged way too far behind you. And the Molten Shell has such a tiny AoE, you can't really do this build if you, like, it's a meme build, I know, but it's not even very viable because it has all those small limitations like, oh, the AoE is too small, oh, the reverse knockback doesn't work well enough, oh, that doesn't work and that doesn't work well enough. So there are many small things that make this build not really viable. And it could be more viable, and I think you could actually do pretty decent single target damage, but there's some weird things where I just did like no damage when I was supposed to do decent damage. But then again, it's really hard to power up Molten Shell because you have to do enough damage to yourself at the right time. And all the other conditional things like debuffing enemies with Infernal Cry, igniting with combustion, and exposure has to be applied at the right time. This is probably gonna be a very scuffed video. This is already 20 minutes in and I cannot remember what I already explained. God damn it. And I'm already recording it second time. I'm gonna leave Pathful Building import code in the description if you want to review this, but the basic core principle is use Molten Shell with many levels to it and many quality to it, debuff enemies, and then do damage to yourself fast enough, but also without mitigating it too much, but also trying to survive the damage that you do to yourself. So this is a jug. Mitigating physical damage also gives me regen. I also cannot be stunned, cannot be slowed down by chill ground, very important. Brass Dome gives just a ton of armor, so you stack a lot of armor. And then just debuff enemies, also helmet with nearby enemies have -9 resistance, 9 fire arrest. And then the Bone Shatter just stack the fierce damage with the trauma stacks. After like 20 trauma stacks, I start doing serious damage to myself. I also tried, you cannot use Imbalanced Guard. I tried with Imbalanced Guard, enemies just absolutely destroy me. It is easier to actually proc Molten Shell, but enemies just absolutely destroy me. I also tried with Transcendence node from the Timeless Jewel, the one that makes your armor mitigate elemental damage, but then you have like almost no mitigation for physical. That way you can empower Molten Shell even faster, and you don't need to stack as many trauma stacks, which is in a sense better because it's less likely that you're gonna one-shot yourself after Molten Shell expires. But also then enemies with physical hits just absolutely destroy you. I really don't know what I already explained. You're gonna have to analyze PUB if you want to figure out what else I was doing and how I'm surviving this and that, or you can ask them in the comments below. I just wanted to quickly mention that around 1 month ago, during What's Unique About This Unique number 13 video, I asked you to subscribe, and since then we gained over around 1000 subscribers, which is pretty massive for me in a month. So I wanted to thank you for that, and I'm hoping that you're gonna be staying for a bit longer because I'm gonna be taking a break from Path of Exile and playing Last Epoch, playing some other games, but there's not gonna be much content on YouTube. However, I'm still gonna be streaming, so maybe check my streams if you're curious what I'm doing. Obviously, I'm gonna continue playing Path of Exile next league. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why it's so difficult for me to do this video. My thoughts are very all over the place, and this build is also, I guess, injuring me. Maybe, you know what, maybe this build actually hurt my brain as well, and maybe that's why I cannot gather my thoughts and cannot speak without stuttering, and there's gonna be a lot of editing. I'm running at 26 minutes. It's probably gonna end up being like 15 minutes video once I edit all the bad parts. Thank you for subscribing. I hope you're gonna stay and not quit during this 1 month of no PoE content. Well, there's gonna be some PoE content once we hear some news about the next league and stuff like that. Obviously, I'm gonna do some builds for last epoch. Probably gonna post a couple of videos, but there's not gonna be all that much. So I guess, yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.